In a world where shadows speak and legends never die. Welcome to Whispers of the Unseen Tales, where the darkness tells its story. And today, it speaks of one of the most powerful myths ever written. I'm Jennifer, the voice behind Whispers of the Unseen Tales, your narrator through the fog and folklore. Tonight, we begin a chilling deep dive into the legacy of one immortal figure, Dracula. This isn't just about a vampire, it's about how one character reshaped horror, influenced cinema, music, and books, and still haunts modern imagination. Stay close. The story begins now. Before vampires ruled the screens, before the fangs, the blood, the silver bullets, there was a book, a legend, a name etched in eternal darkness, Dracula. Written in 1897 by Irish author Bram Stoker, Dracula was more than a horror novel. It was a revolution, blending Gothic fear, forbidden desire, and the terror of the unknown. It gave birth to the vampire as we know it today. Stoker's Dracula wasn't just a creature of the night. He was a symbol of death and seduction. A monster cloaked in charm. He could walk among us, and that was the real horror. Through journals, letters, and telegrams, the novel builds its dread slowly. We don't meet the Count at first. We feel his presence long before he appears. This technique inspired countless horror storytellers, leave the audience guessing, fearing the unseen. Dracula represented more than just fear. He was the dark mirror to Victorian society, challenging sexual repression, religion, and science. He was a predator who crossed oceans, borders, and morals. And yet, he was elegant, sophisticated, immortal. The monster we were afraid of, but couldn't stop watching. That duality, terrifying and attractive, is what made Dracula eternal. Cue light strings swelling, then fade to silence. From the shadows of 1897, he stepped into the future of horror. And Hollywood was waiting. 2 decades after Bram Stoker's death, his creation stepped out of the pages and into the flickering shadows of early cinema. Horror would never be the same. In 1922, Germany gave us Nosferatu, a silent film, a haunting vision. Max Schreck played Count Orlok, not Dracula in name, but unmistakably inspired. The film was so terrifying, Stoker's widow tried to have it destroyed. Whispers layered with a ticking clock. Yet Nosferatu survived and terrified generations. Its shadow-crawling vampire with elongated fingers and a rat-like face became a symbol of pure dread, influencing creature design for decades. But the true face of Dracula arrived in 1931. Enter Bela Lugosi, cloaked in black, accent thick as fog, staring directly into the camera as if into your soul. His Dracula wasn't a beast. He was elegant, controlled, hypnotic. Swelling orchestra, slow string tremble. Lugosi didn't just play Dracula, he became him. His performance defined the vampire archetype, pale, poised, and poetic. Hollywood was mesmerized. And so were we. With Lugosi, Dracula became an icon. Posters, parodies, pop culture. He was no longer just a monster in a book. He was a brand. And horror had found its king. Once a creature of the night, Dracula began to change. He was no longer just a monster hiding in shadows. He became something more dangerous, relatable. By the 1950s and 60s, Christopher Lee's Dracula gave audiences a darker, more violent version, but one that still held a twisted charm. Blood dripped from his fangs, but audiences couldn't look away. Then came the 1992 masterpiece, Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. This wasn't just horror. It was heartbreak, tragedy, romance. Gary Oldman's Dracula loved deeply, suffered endlessly, and made us feel his pain. Orchestral swell with choir in the background. No longer a simple villain, Dracula became a symbol of lost love, immortality, and eternal regret. This shift reflected something deeper in us, of fascination with darkness wrapped in beauty. Modern films and shows followed suit. From Dracula Untold to Netflix's Reinventions, the Count is now a reflection of our fears and our fantasies. A tragic figure haunted by time, by love, and by the curse he can never escape. Dracula isn't just a vampire. He's a reflection, a mirror held up to society's deepest fears. Fear of the outsider, of disease, of desire. In Victorian times, Dracula embodied the fear of sexuality, foreign invasion, and the collapse of rational science. His bite was more than blood, it was taboo. But each era shaped him differently. In the Cold War, he became the aristocratic enemy of the West. In the AIDS crisis, his thirst mirrored paranoia over transmission and bodily danger. Today, Dracula represents something deeper: the price of living forever, the agony of isolation, and the weight of centuries. He's power, seduction, guilt, and loneliness. Slight orchestral rise, eerie reverb. Maybe that's why we can't let him die. Because Dracula isn't just fiction. He's a timeless question. What would we give to never fade away? In 1931, cinema met its vampire king. Bela Lugosi, with his piercing eyes and thick accent, defined Dracula not just for his generation, but for a century. His performance wasn't just terrifying, it was hypnotic. With a slow, deliberate voice and a commanding presence, Lugosi gave Dracula elegance, power, romance. This version of Dracula, cloaked in Gothic shadows and aristocratic flair, became the blueprint. Hollywood found its first monster icon and audiences fell under his spell. Lugosi's Dracula didn't lunge, he glided. He didn't scream, he stared. In doing so, he turned terror into allure and started a cinematic bloodline that would never die. After Lugosi's reign, Dracula began to change. The 1958 Hammer horror film introduced Christopher Lee, taller, fiercer, and drenched in blood. Lee's Dracula was primal. He didn't speak much, he attacked. Gone was the elegance and came raw hunger. He terrified, seduced, and redefined the vampire myth for a new generation. Then came the 1990s, and the legend took a romantic turn. Gary Oldman's Dracula in Francis Ford Coppola's 1992 epic was both terrifying and heartbroken. A monster in love. Now Dracula was no longer just a villain. He was cursed, tragic, almost human. And with every decade, new faces followed: suave businessmen, ancient demons, misunderstood immortals. In recent years, Dracula has returned with new faces and new fears. In Dracula Untold 2014, he's not a villain, but a reluctant savior. The film explores Vlad the Impaler's tragic backstory, transforming the Count into a dark anti-hero, battling for family and honor, not blood. Then came Netflix's Dracula 2020, blending tradition with twists. The Count is clever, cruel, but curiously self-aware, questioning his own legend. These versions echo our world, morally gray, emotionally layered, and hauntingly human. Dracula's power isn't just in his bite anymore, it's in his story. Dracula didn't just terrify the world, he inspired an entire generation of horror. His bite birthed more than victims, it birthed a legacy. From Gothic horror to supernatural thrillers, the Count's shadow lingers in films like Interview with the Vampire, Underworld, and True Blood. Each owes something to his myth. We've seen vampires become kings, rebels, lovers, and monsters. They've moved from misty castles to neon-lit cities. Each evolution driven by the same haunting question: what happens when death isn't the end? Through Dracula, horror found elegance, a blend of seduction, fear, and the eternal. Every modern vampire story, in some way, is still echoing his name. In 1994, Interview with the Vampire showed the undead weren't just monsters, they were mourners. Immortal beings burdened by guilt, desire, and loneliness. Lewis, tormented by his conscience. Lestat, the embodiment of temptation. Their story made vampirism a curse of the soul, not just the flesh. Then came Twilight 2008, a cultural earthquake. Edward Cullen wasn't Dracula, he was a glittering protector. Dangerous, yes, but deeply emotional. He loved before he bit. Critics mocked it, but audiences devoured it. The vampire had evolved again from predator to romantic icon. And in doing so, it spoke to a new generation's fear, not of death, but of emotional intimacy. From Bram Stoker's terror of the foreign other to today's quiet horror of not belonging, the vampire has always mirrored our deepest anxieties. Modern vampire stories reflect modern fears: immortality as isolation, power as burden, beauty as deception. The fangs may be fake, but the metaphors bite deep. Whether it's Edward's restraint, Lewis's regret, or Dracula's dominance, every vampire shows us something we're afraid to admit: that sometimes the real monster is inside. The vampire has survived war, censorship, ridicule, and reinvention. Why? Because it evolves with us. And as long as we fear the dark, Dracula's legacy will live on forever. Dracula didn't stay buried in books or locked on screen. He escaped into music, literature, fashion, and art. From Gothic rock bands like Bauhaus chanting Bela Lugosi's Dead to TV shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the vampire became a symbol of counterculture: dangerous, seductive, and endlessly cool. In literature, Dracula's shadow lingers in every tortured anti-hero, from Anne Rice's Lewis to even Stephenie Meyer's brooding Edward. More than a monster, Dracula became a mood, a cultural shorthand for forbidden desire, hidden fears, and the thrill of rebellion. The vampire is more than a creature of the night. It's a vessel for the things we're afraid to speak about. In Victorian times, Dracula embodied fears of foreign invasion, disease, and repressed sexuality. He was a monster, but also a metaphor. Today, vampires reflect our anxiety about power, consent, addiction, and even loneliness. They lure not just with fangs, but with meaning. Whether stalking the foggy streets of London or glowing under twilight skies, the vampire holds a mirror to society's nightmares, from moral panic to mental health. Dracula never fades. He evolves, rising again with every generation, dressed in new fears, new seductions, new faces. From indie films to Netflix dramas, creators still breathe new life into the vampire myth, blending folklore, psychology, and today's darkest themes. We've seen Dracula as a warlord, a tragic lover, a corporate predator, and he's not done yet. Horror keeps changing, but he's always waiting in the shadows. Because Dracula isn't just a story, he's a legacy. And every horror film that dares to seduce, to frighten, to ask, what if, owes a drop of blood to him. He's more than a legend. He's an echo in every whisper of horror, a shadow behind every screen. Dracula endures because we still crave what he represents. power, seduction, death, immortality. The count may never rise again the same way twice, but the thirst remains, and we always return to the story. Is it his mystery, or is it that he mirrors what we fear in ourselves? The dark side we pretend doesn't exist. As horror evolves, will Dracula remain a shadow on the wall or step once more into the spotlight, reborn for a new generation? If you felt the chill of Dracula's legacy tonight, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Whispers of the Unseen Tales. We dive deep into the shadows every week. And tell us in the comments, what form do you think Dracula will take next?